Right now, the Review Parole Board has decided that former tennis star and convicted rapist Bob Hewitt will remain in jail pending a new parole application. Last month, the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Ronald Lamola, instructed the National Commissioner of Correctional Services, Fraser, to take the decision to place convicted rapist Bob Hewitt on parole on review. This after two of the victims were against Hewitt being released on parole. Hewitt, who's now 79, was convicted for the rape of two young women and sexually assaulting another who had coached in the 1980s and the 1990s. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison.
Well, it's been a really interesting case, really talked about a lot in the media. The issue of whether Bob Hewitt, the convicted rape tennis star, must be given parole or not. A few minutes ago we sat with some of the judges who are presiding over the Review Parole Board, and they have indicated to us, the media, that in a few hours' time, latest by Monday, they will let the media know if Mr. Hewitt will be given parole or not. But Tanya Kuhn, a lawyer representing two of the victims, was also part of the press conference, and she's here to share some of her experiences throughout this case and whether she feels or is hopeful that justice will be served. Tanya, just so far from the time you started the case up until now, are you happy with how the system has transpired?
Obviously, initially we were not happy because the victims were not afforded the opportunity to make representations to the parole board as they are entitled to by law, which is why when it came to our knowledge that parole had been granted to Mr. we made an appeal to the minister to intervene, which he then did, and which is why we have the proceedings today, which is the Parole Review Board. Subsequent to the minister intervening, we were given a date, which was the 21st of October, to make written submissions. Now, our officers are acting on behalf of two of the victims, and attorneys Evershed Sutherland is acting on behalf of the third victim. Our officers and all Vet attorneys also represented Evershed's attorneys at today's proceedings, so that all the parties were represented. So we were invited to make oral representations, which is what we did today.
And are you hopeful that for the victims more above anything else that justice will be served?
I'm more than hopeful. I want to say, it sounds arrogant, but I want to say I'm confident. I'm confident because the law was not followed. Because of that, it's a procedural error. The Parole Review Board took that into consideration today. They've already made the decision, as you said. We are waiting the outcome, but I'm confident that they will make the right decision, which is that the proceedings of granting Mr. Hewitt parole, that decision cannot stand. A new process needs to be followed, and our clients need to be afforded the opportunity to make proper representations to the Parole Board as they are entitled to in law.
Just speaking to the victims, why was it important for them, for him not to get parole?
You know, remember, this time it's about the process. It's about the fact that they have constitutional rights. So does the perpetrator. We acknowledge that. But our clients feel that in this whole process, when they were raped, we're talking about children that's been raped, so their rights were violated. They were violated. Their legal rights have also been violated. During the trial, they are almost also on trial. So the whole process has been very traumatic for them. So it's important for them at this point to stand up and say, we are the victims, but we have rights. And they are wanting their rights to be acknowledged. But they're not only doing it for themselves, they're also doing it for other victims. We must remember that they were 12 when they were raped. They are now adults, so they can speak up, but there are lots of other children that cannot speak up for themselves. So for them, it's also very much about the principle.
And let's say, lastly, let's say things don't turn out in your favor. What then becomes the way forward for you and your clients?
I've already discussed the matter with the other attorney, Peter Finnikak of Evershed Sutherland, and we will definitely approach the High Court if we are not successful today.
Well, that was lawyer Tanya Kuhn, representing two of the victims who were sexually violated by former tennis star Bob Hewitt, saying that she's really confident and hopeful that justice will be served. Also putting into light the fact that these victims, who are now adults, at that time they were raped by Mr. Hewitt, they were actually 12-year-old, they were kids, and perhaps they are now being voices for those that are victims that don't have a voice. But for now, we await the outcome.